For national growth and development, effective management of human and natural resources is crucial. The effective management of these requires political and institutional processes as well as outcomes to achieve developmental goals. The federal government, after scrutiny of the economic burden of subsidizing premium motor spirit for domestic consumption, decided that it has to go to save the country, trillions of naira being expended every year as subsidy. The planned fuel subsidy removal and the palliative to cushion the effects of the subsidy removal is what we will be looking at this morning on Daybreak. An economist, team lead, CEO, Grand Renaissance International Limited, and public affairs analyst, Mr. Obinaya Oruagba, joins us in the studio to give us some insights and perspectives to some of these issues. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak.
My pleasure, Ayuba. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Doing very well.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm certain that you've been following all the conversations around the removal of the fuel subsidy, which, by the way, started for as long as I can remember, years back.
Yeah.
And we're still here today. The government have decided to remove the fuel subsidy, but it seems to be in a bit of a fix. How to do it remains a big issue. Recently, we heard that the federal government secured $800 million, loan facility, whatever you want to call it, from the World Bank to, use to cushion the effect of the removal of the fuel subsidy, which is meant to end by June.
Yeah.
How do you see all of this? What do you make of it? Would you say that the government is taking the right approach in this matter as it approaches this issue of removal of fuel subsidy?
Okay, thank you very much. To be fair to this present government, and like you said, this matter has been on the front burner for donkey years. And what I have seen is the lack of political will to cut to the chase and deal with it once and for all. And it's also important to go back to what Chinua Achebe said. Chinua Achebe said, if you don't know where the rain started beating you, you will not know where it stopped. We've been independent in 1960. We discovered oil in DAYBREAK in the 50s. And we have had joint venture agreements with different companies, and we've been mining. We've been part of OPEC, and we've had quotas. And at some point, we had an oil boom. And what would you have expected? That we take the resources from the oil boom and build infrastructure. And part of building infrastructure is refineries. And when you refine, you're able to consume locally. And then over time, we saw a few things begin to happen. We had such terminologies as turnaround maintenance. You must have heard it, TAM. And then issues around corruption in that sector popped their ugly heads. And then we did not have the political will to punish people for doing the wrong things. So what our people will say is that it's not the day you cut down the tree that it dies. It dries up over time. So what you're seeing today is failure of governance counting from way back, where you have at least 3 major refineries, maybe one other. You have the Port Harcourt, the Kaduna, the Warri, and so on. And then as we sit here, you cannot say you have a drop of oil from any of them. And then we are still expending resources, paying people. And then up until we came up with the Petroleum Industry Act of 2021, we have been paying salaries, huge sums of money to staff working in places where not a drop of oil has been dropping. And then what did we resort to doing? We decided to start importing refined PMS. A country that produces crude now sells cheaply to the world and then exposes herself to the vagaries of the exchange rate environment. You can never win there because it keeps fluctuating. And then you can see, as of 2015, the exchange rate to the dollar was 157 naira to a dollar. But as we sit here today, we got to a point last year when it went to 920. Now, what are the implications? It has affected manufacturing. It has affected you and I on the streets. And you know quite well that when oil sneezes, the rest of the country catches cold because it affects transportation, it affects food, it affects the person in the market. What I would have expected, to answer you directly, sorry I had to go through all of this journey, but I needed to trace a history. Your history is your history. Now, what I would have expected is I would have a stakeholders meeting and engagement. So I ask you, you are in the media, has anyone invited you to a stakeholders meeting to discuss this matter? I doubt. But I remember in the secondary school in those days, sometime in 1984, issues around the same subsidy was discussed. And I remember we discussed it. Secondary school children had to go discuss and ask questions. How do we do it? And so debates were held. Now, the civil society, Ben Gerson came up a few days ago and said if any attempt is made to remove this subsidy, they will go on the streets. These are issues. When they go on the streets, can you control it?
All
now,
right.
have we had that discussion with civil society, with the civil servants? Have we had a discussion with the people in the oil and gas industry, downstream and upstream? Now, I do not know if it has happened, but I sincerely believe that if it has happened, you are in the media, it will have been reported on Trust TV.
Well, this morning we saw one of the headlines on the Punch newspaper saying that federal government is promising a 40% pay rise for federal civil servants, which will take effect from the end of April. That's according to the Ministry of Labor. So perhaps you may also
I have a
react
problem
to
with that. I'm going to come to you.
Okay.
My father-in-law was a director in the Ministry of Labor. In fact, he organized the election that brought in Adams Oshomole. I had a discussion with this gentleman. He's 82 today, this year. And the man said, are you supposed to announce when you're increasing salaries? So you just, I heard it too. You just announced that you're going to increase salaries by 40%. The orange seller has heard. The tailor has heard. I don't work in the civil service. So they go jack up the price of meat. And I have to buy in the same market. And then the poor civil servant, what actually is the value of the 40%? Someone that earns 45,000, probably 90,000. A director does not end up to 300,000. I stand to be corrected. And then you say it's 40%. What's 40%? Do the math over 10 and all of over 100, 10 over 100 and all of those mathematics. How much does it arrive at? And what is the price of a tin of milk in the market now? Maybe these are things that should have happened naturally. You see your pay slip and you see that there's been an increase. The dog that bites does not show his teeth. Do we need to make noise and shout about this?
All right, Mr. Rock, but you know, one question that a lot of people have been asking is, this particular administration came in 2015. In a couple of days, it will be 8 years old. Yeah. Why is it doing this now? As a matter of fact, before this particular administration came in, I do remember that the president wasn't in support of subsidy. He wasn't. But he came in, and this administration has been paying subsidy under what it calls under recovery. Now, it's about to leave office. The question people are asking is, why now?
To be fair to this present government, there's been a desire, especially from the president, to do things right. However, it's also politics. We're in a democracy. It's not a military regime where you can use executive fiat. So the president probably would have to listen to his party. Let me tell you, if you ask me, I suspect that the president may be trying to protect the next government coming into power. And this is what I think. The president is not going for re-election. So usually what you see, if we're going to be very objective, is that you see a government about to leave office, take the bull by the horn, and take some very hard decisions.
Well, another question is, should you be taking loan on behalf of another administration? Because, I mean, $800 million is a lot of money, yeah?
Should we really go into that discussion on loan now? Because by the end of this budget cycle, by the end of this budget cycle, if you ask me, by the end of this budget cycle, this government would have expended, we would be in debt up to about 77 trillion. The budget of 2023, Nigeria's budget 2023, is 20.5 trillion. 9 trillion is expected income. About 12 trillion is expected to be borrowed to fund the budget. I have a challenge with that. Because as I've always said, is there no other way? You have a document in SMEDEN, Small Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria. Because I'm an entrepreneurship enthusiast, expert, exponent, I always draw your attention to it. The One Local Government, One Product initiative, initiated by Dupe Adelaja several years ago, tells you that every local government area in Nigeria has at least one commodity that it has comparative advantage on. So you have here in Jalingo. You have palm oil in Giep. You have egusi in Doma, where I did my youth service. You have denkeli. What do you call denkeli? Potatoes. In Bokos. And you have kafanchan with her ginger. And in the international market, under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, 54 African countries, I had the privilege of speaking in Burundi, Bujumbura, last year at the Nigeria-Burundi Business Summit. And I began to ask a few hard questions. All through the time I was in Bujumbura, I drank fresh juice, passion fruit, avocado, and so on. I hardly drank fizzy drinks. Meaning that Burundi, as small as it may look, with a small population, 15 minutes by air to Rwanda, DRC to the left, Rusizi River and all of those rivers there. You have Lake Tanganyika, which is 760 kilometers long and 76 kilometers wide, with about 5 to 6 countries bordering it, actually about 9. With Uganda, I later went to Kampala. And what am I trying to say? Has Nigeria looked at investing in Burundi in all of these things as the giant of Africa, and then exploring or exploiting the resources within the African region? That way you derive foreign direct investment. John Maxwell said leadership is influence. Since you are that leader in Africa, maybe you hold hands with these African countries after the ECOWAS region, and then see how you can now deploy the resources you have. Use what you have to get what you want. But this act of taking the first action of borrowing whenever anything comes up seems to me like a knee-jerk approach to things, which was why I talked about stakeholders. There are 3 things you do if you are doing operations management. One is stakeholders mapping. Who are the stakeholders in Project Nigeria? The number 2 is stakeholders engagement. You're engaging me right now. The next one is stakeholders management. How do you manage the stakeholders? Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, NASI, National Association of Small Scale Industrialists, NASMI, National Association of Small Scale and Entrepreneurs, and all of that. What about all of the governmental agencies there? According to the Auditor General of the Federation, there are over 900 MDAs. Do they eat? Do they wear clothes? Do they take drugs? But as you sit here, I like what you're wearing. UNTL, that use the cotton from the north of Nigeria. What has happened to UNTL? UNTL has gone down, and over 4,000 staff ended up Okada riders and probably have died. Have we considered reviving it? To revive UNTL is about giving gas, which is the work of the NNPC, which goes back to the history of the refineries. Without gas, the gineries are not able to work on the cotton that the farmers have produced. And I don't want to go into the 3 cardinal points of the present government, which is what? Security, economy, anti-corruption.
Whatever we say at the end of the day, we are still back to the issue of the government have already taken a decision to remove the subsidy. Now, all they are looking at is how do we make that transition seamless for Nigerians, which is why this money has been borrowed. The idea of, sharing the money to the poorest of the poor through cash transfer to their accounts is what, a lot of Nigerians have reacted to, And then others have also made the argument that, why are you sharing this money? Fix the refinery, So I want to know where you stand in all of this and, the justification.
I'm actually sitting.
Okay, where you sit in all of this?
Okay, where you sit in all of this?
Okay, that's what laugh, because when you discuss subsidy, there's so much tension in the room. I like that. Where I stand on this point actually is, there's no need hiding it. The Yorubas will tell you that when 2 siblings come into a room and come out smiling, they have lied to each other. I have had cause to say that if this money has not been borrowed, we shouldn't borrow it. We over-borrowed. No matter all of the argument about debt to whatever ratio and all of that, GDP ratio, whether we have an income generation problem or we have a debt problem, all of that is semantics. The truth be told, Nigeria is not where it's supposed to be. Time was when we used to pay salaries in Guyana to teachers and a few other places. So what has happened to us? But be that as it may, to answer you directly, no, sir, we shouldn't share the money. We have shared enough. And there's really nothing wrong in giving a piece of what we have earned to the vulnerable groups. So you say you have 10 million persons in the conditional cash register, that we give 5,000, and then I will send the humanitarian services ministry giving out 20,000. I've seen that on TV. We cannot argue. But the question is, how did we generate the list? Who are these people? Okay, you can see the village. You can say the village heads identify the poorest or the poor in their communities. But even if you have identified them, the question I always ask is there no better way of disbursing this money? So this is what I say. As an entrepreneurship coach, what do I recommend? I recommend that if you don't train them, do not blame them. So you see the average person who has not managed 1,000 before, you go give the person 20,000. The next thing, the person goes to look for one bottle of palm wine to drink and so on. It's possible some have done better, but I'm suspecting that if you gather them in a group, in a cooperative, and you got someone like you, even if you don't have a certificate in entrepreneurship, sir, you are able to teach operations management, business flow, and so on. Okay, there are 4 market days in the southeast, in Igbo land. You have Eke, Orie, Nkwo, Afo. So you go to the big market day and say, okay, you women, 10 of you, go to the market together. Reduce your cost. There are 2 ways you make money in business. They taught us in business school. Either you increase your volume of production or you reduce your cost of production. So you take these 10 women and put them in one vehicle.
Well, this money is not for them to do business, actually.
No, they should do business.
It's for them to take care of the extra costs that will come with the removal subsidy. So we are talking about transportation, for instance. Now you have people who are working, and ordinarily they will pay, say, maybe 200 naira to get to their workplace. Now they are having to pay 500 or 1,000 or whatever it is. So this money is to help, fill up, and
let's tell
whatever.
My brother, let's tell ourselves. So. You know why I got into entrepreneurship? I retired at 36. I left my job. Because what the colonial masters were supposed to have taught the colonized people is what we are still discussing now. We were supposed to have been taught, first of all, ideas generation.
But Mr. Rockbar, no matter what anyone is taught,
yes.
What they are proposing is giving the money to 10 million households, a total of 50 million people. The plan is to give 5,000 to each of these households for 6 months, monthly.
Yeah.
So the question I will ask is, do you even think that if you give them this 5,000 and then pull out the subsidy, would that cushion the effect?
No, it will not. That's why I was trying to give us an alternative. And I do not like to go on sets like this. I go on different sets to be a talking head without providing solutions. The foundation of this thing is what I was going at. At the foundation of it is this issue of dependency is not sustainable. You've seen money shared. Is it the first time we're going to share 5,000? This $800 million is not up to how many billions have been shared over the years. Go check your records. But if you go back in time, I recommend that rather than giving them 5,000, put them together, sink a borehole, form a cooperative. I began to talk about the OLOP initiative. These people, I served in Doma government area in 1991. That's about 32 years ago. My journey today began from Doma. My NYC Alawi was 350 naira. It's not up to this 5,000 I'm talking about. You can say the value was much then. But I started buying yams, this same money, 5,000, then it was 2,000, 3,000, 6,000, and gathering them in my room. My room became my warehouse. And I started shipping it to the east. My mom was giving yams. We found out that the yam was 7 times cheaper in Doma than in refugee market in Owerri. And she was a teacher. So if she had that much yam, she would not consume all of that. Then she should begin to think about yam can be used for fried yam. So have you even bought a frying pan? For them, it's more sustainable. So you give them 5,000 today, you give them 5,000 tomorrow also. Let's call a spade a spade. Everywhere you have a local government secretariat. If they had a space by the local government secretariat where they fry things, I met a traditional ruler from Garaku. Okay. And let me land. I met a traditional ruler in Garaku. And I said, what is your challenge? He said he gets subvention from the state government. This mentality of collecting from state government is not sustainable. As I was driving here, I heard that some state governments were sponsoring people to go for pilgrimage and all that. Let's not go into that argument. But I think Nigerians need to come to a point where we talk about self-reliance, where we teach our people wealth creation and not job creation, where the mindset is about what you can create from your environment.
What you are talking about will take time. It's more of either mid-term or long-term.
No, sir.
Kind of a thing, and we are talking about a policy that is taking effect in June. And we are talking about how do we make the transition seamless? How do we? It's going to be hard, whether we like it or not. I mean, imagine you said that when Premium Motors, when Phil sneezes, everyone everywhere catches cold. So
Yes.
we know about the ripple effect that this is going to have on the economy. So if you are buying, say, a liter of fuel for 400 naira, which is
Black market
likely
rate
what
now.
is going to happen.
It's going for 402.
Yeah, 402 naira.
Yeah.
For a liter of fuel that we now buy 195 naira.
Yeah.
That's double. That's more than double of what. So envisage a situation where virtually everything in the market goes up times 2 of what we have right now. And we have not even recovered from the impact of the COVID-19 and the Russia-Ukraine war. We have not recovered from that. And we are talking about another, increase and all that. We just had an inflation figure that has gone, an 18-year high. So what are we really aiming to do? What are we putting our hands into, really? Are we not going to have a situation where you have Nigerians on the streets, protesting and damaging things? Because we just had a cashless thing, a cashless policy, that has ravaged virtually everyone in this country and all that. So how do we deal with this in a way that, yes, agreed, even government says we are going to remove it, that is settled. There seems to be a consensus somehow on the fact that, subsidy is costing Nigeria trillions and it's not good for the economy. That is settled. But how do we do it? How do we make sure that ordinary people do not suffer consequences that they are not prepared for? Aside from people that work in the federal civil service that are now being promised 40% increase.
So you see, we're back to that same argument. So how do we do it? Methodology. There must be a method to every madness. So number one, this is what I think may happen. I also began to tell you about the stakeholders' engagement. If you engage the people, in politics, you do town hall meetings. So we should also do town hall meetings on this one. Let the people understand why you need to remove the subsidy. If you don't explain it to them, communication is key. Someone said, until the person you're communicating with has understood, you have not communicated. And like you rightly said, it's only 5% of our population that is in the civil service. So even if you increase by 40%, you can calm them down so that labor does not worry you. But the average person on the streets who works in the private sector will also be affected, and you're not going to increase his salary by 40%, because employers of labor also have costs. Diesel is over 800 naira per liter. So what I would recommend is there are critical areas that affect people, transportation, which you mentioned. So do we go back to what we used to do, Abuja about mass transit and all of those, and then put money in those areas? You have Innocent, you have other private transport firms. Do we go into a discussion, the same issue of engagement, and say, okay, do we invest in buying more buses, which has been done before? If you look at the Shopee, when in 2012, we went to Ojota and under the Beggar Bridge, under Jonathan, what came out of it? There was Shopee, Subsidy Reinvestment Program. And then they came up with a busing system and so on. Do we get buses where you put a sticker and say 50% for anybody that bought this bus? Okay? Now, but if you're talking about the $800 million, you know what I think? I'm thinking that rather than sharing the 5,000 to people, set up committees in every local government area and give each local government area $1 million. I agree with them, have retirees, pensioners, police, security, and everybody form a board. And then I agree a few things that can be done to cushion the effect that will, the infrastructure you can build that will touch the lives of these people you would have given 5,000 naira to. What are the things they can do? They need to move the farm produce out of the rural areas. The next thing you need to do is, how do you find markets for what has been brought out of the rural areas? When you have sold those items, can you put it in a pool? That's why I talked about cooperative. And then find a way to now give profits generated from the potato, from the yam and the palm oil, which is the low-hanging fruit for us as an agrarian country, and then give it back to these people. Then identify who they are. And please forgive me. It is what I know that I will teach you. Is it possible that you now gather them? My mother used to teach people how to do buns, how to fry. Your mother used to teach how to do akara. Your mother probably taught how to be a seamstress. Teach our people critical skills so that they are not constantly waiting for handouts from politicians and from government. Stop this sharing culture. Rather build these structures. If you give $1 million to every local government area, you will still have some change remaining. Then you can now give it to the media, in Trust TV, in National Orientation Agency to create awareness on what you want to do. So the people
Mr.
feel that you're
Arakwa,
about them, you're not just sharing.
Mr. Arakwa,
It's
this also still sounds like sharing of the money, but in a different form, because there's no guarantee that those you're giving it to will use it for the purpose. But my question is, every governments of countries across the world, they have something they do for their people. We saw the way the United States government came up with palliative for their people during the COVID. So when it's okay to remove subsidy on petrol because, of course, it's there's a lot of corruption in it. But what would the Nigerian government be doing for its people? Yes, we've heard the argument that it will go into health sector and all of that. But, I mean, what is the guarantee that the health sector will be improved because they've removed this? The education sector will be improved. What is the guarantee that all of these, there will be no corruption and all of that? The shopping you mentioned, we know how it ended. Corruption again. So what's the guarantee?
There's no guarantee. Let's call it spade a spade. But you know, I think it was IBB that said, history will not forgive you if you don't take any step. But history will forgive you if you take a step and make a mistake. Let's even do something. This present government, to be fair to her, has introduced a lot of intervention programs that if you can get data, because data hardly lies. For instance, you have the National Microfinance Bank that has the AXMIs and all, and during COVID, you saw most of the things that were done. The challenge we have is that we don't even keep enough data. You have AXMIs, you have the COVID-19 fund that was given. And then they came up with the idea of, okay, train the people, which is what National Microfinance Bank is doing. Train the people. When you train them, you make them write business plans, and then you give them money. The next thing is monitoring. And then they set up enterprise development institutions. My company is one. Yeah, EDIs. And the EDIs are supposed to train them. And then apart from the monies they will get from government, it used to be 10 million. It came down to 3 million. Okay, now it's 3 million now for AXMIs. Now it's expected that you give them a moratorium of about 6 months before they start repaying, and they have between 4 to 6 years to repay. Now what we have found out is that there has even been apathy, especially in the Southeast and a few places, on accessing these loans. So awareness is key. We came up with an idea which we told the Central Bank and told National Microfinance Bank. So our company has even gone around the Southeast, including South-South, creating awareness for people to say, this money exists. There was also the survival fund, if you had 3 staff and above, which you could access. But I'm amazed that when I go for enlightenment programs, people tell you, I don't know what you're talking about. And then lack of belief in whatever government is doing. So we need to tell ourselves the truth that we need to engage our people.
Okay.
The corruption, as per corruption, my brother, including in America, there are cases going on CNN now that are being discussed. We may not obliterate it as well, but let me also tell you something. If you use technology, just like we talked about the election, I can see you holding a tablet or is it iPad. If we use technology, and like what happened to cashless policy, Naira redesign, what was the issue? That people should transfer money. It's more transparent that way. But this one of giving cash and an envelope to people, you can claim you gave 1 million people and
okay, you know,
and they did to the rest.
Yes, you know, Mr. Arakwa, there's a lot of complications to some of these issues.
Yes.
We saw how the cashless policy thing failed, as a matter of fact. No, well, it's not a cashless policy. People call it cashless policy, but let's call it the Naira redesign policy. It failed woefully because of, I don't know, maybe we have lack of understanding, or you have the larger population unable to be on the e-transaction system or the electronic transaction system and all that. You may call them unbanked people. Yes. So it failed. Now, you also have a situation where some of these interventions, some of these programs, the business angle of it, the business relies heavily on environment. So we talk about ease of doing business. If you don't have that environment, which of course the energy sector is a major factor that determines how well an environment functions business-wise. So if you don't have that environment, whatever money you are pumping into anything, don't you think that it has a way of, you know, affecting those businesses, and eventually you may not even, you know, realize the results, the desired results that the intervention is meant to have, or the effect?
We're still back to square one. The energy is at the heart of production, so that you are not just a consuming country. And the energy you're talking about is reliant on Forex, which is a different discussion we may need to have another day, because even that also has subsidy, where dollar is at the parallel market selling at 750 and you're giving it at the official market at 400 to 450. That's another opaque, non-transparent thing that I don't want us to go into today. But staying with you, the truth of the matter is, when I talked about sitting down to plan, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. What happened to the Naira redesign? It's not that it failed. And even if we accept that it failed, how did it fail? Sitting down and planning well, you do not implement a policy within 3 months. But also understand that that issue of financial inclusion has been there since over several years, like counting back to 2007. But getting our people to get into that banking system, where over 70% of our money is outside the banking system. No government would allow that to happen because you're dealing with the issue of insurgency. One thing you will never deny is the fact that during that period, kidnapping reduced because the kidnappers would not allow you to transfer money. Superficial, because they would want cash. And since it's returned, kidnapping has also ramped up. But what would have happened is what I talked about: stakeholders, mapping, engagement, and management. If we had managed the people, if you notice, POS and all of those platforms, digital platforms, ramped up. And that was an opportunity for you if you wanted to invest in that. But if we took time and we didn't rush it, maybe the people would have embraced it more. Maybe your grandmother in the village would have helped her open a bank account. But what has now happened is that there's an awareness where you can board a taxi and transfer your fare. But carrying cash around, if you've been around, go to other countries. Not many countries do things with cash. But let's consider that our people, you cannot force people into it too quickly. Take time and graduate them to that digital platform where they begin to understand how to do businesses digitally. That was what happened to that policy. Not that there's anything wrong with the Naira redesign and transition to the digital platform. Let's call a spade a spade. We have not really been fair to our people at the bottom of the pyramid. We've just been coasting. So you and I dress up very well. You need to transfer money. How many times would I give you cash? You transfer money, I transfer to you. But the people in the villages have been so used to cash. I saw your report on the tailors. They still want cash. I don't think it's sustainable. There are people who make clothes for 150,000 Naira, the beautiful thing that our sister is wearing, and all of that. You're not going to carry 150,000 cash. There's issue of security around it and all of that. It's safer to transfer, to convince that guy. It's just a mindset thing. Then the CBN came up with the e-Naira thing. I am also concerned about how much awareness was created around the e-Naira. Is it really working as it's supposed to work? So it will still come down to that issue of who are the stakeholders in Project Nigeria. All, right. All of us.
So all of this
engage
affects
us.
the environment,
yes.
Ease of doing business.
Ease
all
of
this
doing
affects
business.
Ease of doing business, right? So again, let me just also say that we also have an issue. You mentioned where you started your NYSC and all that. If you look at the issue of insecurity that we're dealing with now, would you say the same thing about that same place where you served, and how things have changed now in terms of the
not being able to access,
not being able to, and for the entire country really to do business with itself, really, if you talk about comparative advantage and the rest of them?
It's tough, my brother. When I gave that proverb that when two siblings walk into a room and come out smiling, they have liked each other, that's actually what I was adverting my minds to. Now you have Chinese arrested for paying bandits to access our minerals. You go to Bauchi and there's a particular mineral, I've forgotten the name, just escaped me now, that is being sold 2,000 naira a bag. Incidentally, that's the mineral you have in the battery in your car, the battery in your wristwatch. Zimbabwe just banned the export of that. We have exposed ourselves to exploitation just because we have not sat down to discuss the very best way to run Project Nigeria. So if you go back to insurgency, the farmers are not able to go farm, and after farming, they need to pay bandits and kidnappers to harvest what they have produced. So yam that I used to buy for 100 naira for 40,000 goes to 80,000. And the implication is that if I go into an eatery to eat, the price of my plate of food goes up. So whatever I'm earning, inflation obliterates it. But be that as it may, when I told you about technology, which was what I talked about the Naira redesign, it was about technology. Technology, we were taught in business school, is an enabler. If you go to Afghanistan or Iraq, they can escort you from the airport to wherever you want to go to, because that has become a business for some people who manage all of the hardware and all of the armory and so on. That's technology. They can know where a mine has been planted and you can dodge it. It's risk management with my background in insurance. So let's not stop acting as if we are isolated from the rest of the world. No, Nigeria is not isolated. The truth of the matter is, if we sit down and plan very well, what happens is, it's only Nigeria is say, let's say, housing for all by the year 2000. This by the year 2020. We're always in a hurry to say, okay, we're going to escape this in the next 3 years. Why do you want to do it in June?
All right, Mr. Orakwa. Yes, my question is going to that. And this particular, there are some persons that say this particular administration has failed in removing subsidy. That particular issue of removing subsidy, they could not do it. And that there's no need for them to now do it at this point. So there are some persons that are saying that, why don't this administration allow it for the next government to come in, study what they have on ground, and see how they can go about it. There are some persons that feel that way. What do you think?
No, they have a right to feel that way, but the government is still the one in charge now. And probably because they don't want to be recorded in the history books as having failed, like you just said. They failed
in subsidy removal.
Now, let me tell you, let's call a spade a spade. This government may just be thinking that she's doing the next government a favor. And remember, it's the same party, APC. So, let me tell you why people fear to remove subsidy, if you want the truth. They fear to remove subsidy because if you try it, the opposition party will use it as a campaign issue against you. So now that there's no election coming up, I sincerely believe we should remove subsidy. I'm sorry. The methodology for removal is now what we should be discussing. Call a spade. Because, like you rightly said, there's so much corruption involved. Who is consuming the 6 trillion? Do we look like 6 trillion? And if we recover 6 trillion in a budget where we're borrowing 12 trillion, maybe that will also help to reduce the borrowing.
If you listen to NLC, it says, don't remove the subsidy until you fix the refineries. What do you say to that?
Okay, so those are the discussions we need to have. So let's agree that we remove the subsidy, discuss, like Ghana. Maybe you should also ask me what Ghana did. The National Petroleum Authority in Ghana, by March 14, thereabout, talked about, in South Africa, in an event, talked about what they did. They removed subsidy. In the first few months, a few companies went down. But as I speak, things are stabilizing in Ghana. Yes, they've had a few economic issues, which is a different discussion altogether. But Ghana has removed subsidy, and they didn't die.
So what are the lessons for us?
The lessons for us is that they identified critical areas where they removed energy subsidy, but applied the money that has been saved from there to other sectors, like you mentioned, transport and all those things that will touch the lives of their people. But they're having all of that hard discussion with their people. So we need to sit down and have that hard discussion with our people, including Nigerian Labour Congress. Has the government invited them to sit down and say, okay, we're going to remove this. Okay, on the refineries, the Nigerian Labour Congress, their staff are the ones working in the refineries. So we need to also query the sincerity and the transparency of the people who work in the refineries, who would take a particular item that was supposed to be new and take a refurbished one and put under turnaround maintenance. These are issues. We also, the followers, including the government, are culpable in one way or the other.
Do you think the lack of trust in government may be responsible for some of the pushback we're seeing on this policy?
Of course. And then lack of trust, like in marriage. There are two challenges in marriage and communication and money. It's lack of trust. Because the question is, if you even look at the last election that was held, or what is happening in Adamawa and a few other places, people will sit back and say, okay, so we queued up. And so did it actually go the way we expected? Was the result not supposed to be transmitted? Was it transmitted? So when those things happened, what was the reaction of government? So that's the challenge. If people trust you, they will do business with you. If people like you, they smile for you. If people love you, they will have a discussion with you. Let's call a spade a spade. Let's stop pretending about this matter. There are a few things that Labour have, like for instance, the aviation staff are saying that from 2009 there was an agreement that was not implemented. ASU will sit back and say, you have an agreement. We all went to school now. We're all students, young boys. And then you know all these issues have been there. We all suffered strike. And my own children are also going to suffer strike. And then ASU goes on strike for 8 months. Why? For something that was agreed upon and has not been done. So every government passes the buck to the next one. Maybe that's why this present government is trying to say, okay, let's kill it so that the next government starts on a fresh slate. But again, they cannot decide for the next government what they need to do. But I sincerely think that if this government says she has the political will to remove subsidy, let's even remove it, because let me tell you the truth, our borders are porous. So you get refined crude into Atlas Cove, and then you move it into the hinterland. Let me even shock you. I traveled to Port Harcourt on my way to Abonema about 2 months ago. And I found out that I bought fuel at 320 naira per litre. And someone in Soka said, no, outside Abuja and Lagos, people don't buy fuel at 195. You want the truth? Go up north and go to the east and other places. They've been buying fuel at 280 and so on. So the subsidy itself, I don't even know whether it's been working. Who are the people consuming this subsidy? And you've heard it here. I'm sure you've talked about it on your set. Where is this subsidy? In 2015, 2016, this government made an effort to remove subsidy. It was not captured in the budget. It was after that that they felt the pulse of the people and decided to. And let me even tell you, they've even tried last year or 2 years ago to say, okay, let the economic, forces determine the price of fuel. And of course, there was this shout. But check, most times the shout is either from Abuja, the key cities, Lagos. The rest of the cities,
could that be why the product is still selling 195 in Abuja and Lagos and sells at a different price in other places? Well, let's just leave it there. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining on Daybreak this morning and sharing your perspectives with us. Really, we appreciate that. Economist, team lead, and CEO Grand Renaissance International Limited and Public Affairs Analyst, Mr. Obinaya Oruakpa. Thank you for joining us on Daybreak.
My pleasure. Thank you, Hugo. Thank you. Dan.
All right.